Okay, very well. Thank you for having me today. So we're going to start with a little bit of history about Boone County Water Rescue, its origin over the years, the growth of the team, the growth of the technology, and the techniques used and have been used and developed, especially by Captain Dale Apple, which I'll get into in a second, over the years to improve the recovery capabilities, especially when it comes to drowning victims, but also evidence for the police, also vehicles, boats, pretty much anything on the water. So just to start off, the slide mentions here, it is a voluntary agency and has been since its creation in 1967. And just a little story behind the creation and how it came to be. A gentleman by the name of Dale Apple, unfortunately, he suffered a tragic incident where one of his best friends and his best friend's father, while they were fishing one night out on the Ohio River, a barge struck them and both men perished. And again, this is prior to 1967, just shortly. But at that time, or point in time, back then, there really wasn't the technology we have today, the techniques, the methods to recover someone. And basically, nature had to take its course, and not to be gross about it, but yes, that means the bodies would eventually float after a few days or some period of time. Dale, when he was in his early 20s when this happened, so that really shocked him to the point where, in fact, he actually witnessed his best friend's dad's body at the point where they were recovered. And again, it was shocking to him to the point where he felt he needed to do something to improve the recovery capabilities and to ensure that no one else experienced that, or at least make it minimum as possible for someone who had to experience that. So that's where Dale got the idea, and several friends who were certified with the state of Kentucky, the civil defense. They went through a diving program, got certified with diving, and that's how it began. And it was only maybe 3 or 4 of his friends that created this. So, and all these guys were very young. They're in the early 20s when they did this. So from there, over the past, we're now at 56 years, a lot has been done. So we are a part of Boone County Emergency Management currently today, and have been. We are providing dive capabilities to the area, rivers, lakes, and ponds. And I won't read this verbatim, but we also do boat patrols throughout the weekend, and that's to ensure to help the community in case of needs, if the boat breaks down, and especially emergency needs where there's life-threatening situation. We are here to help those people. Safety and education, we do training. We've trained other agencies for years. Ice rescue, diving. We've actually certified other dive teams, their divers, through a program that Dale Apple actually created, as well as some other gentleman, Lieutenant Rick Haddon. He's the dive instructor, has been for many years. So that's pretty much the basis of what we covered. Angela, next slide. And this is just giving you an idea of the area that we currently cover just on the Ohio River alone. It's basically from dam to dam. In other words, from Mendell Dam all the way down to Markland Dam. So it's about, I think it's around a little over 80 miles of Ohio River that this team covers. And again, all the way through the Cincinnati. Of course, the focus of the boat patrols is mainly in congested areas. Primarily, you'll see us mainly downtown Cincinnati, but we'll also be in the Lawrenceburg area and also down in the Rising Sun and Big Bone area as well. Next slide. And this is just some general statistics on the hours that this team actually works, as well as the number of boat patrols we do, which is Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We also do special events. Of course, the EBN fireworks, as many of you know, we are out there for that. Details, those are various, anywhere from evidence recovery, vehicle recovery, or body recovery. Special events, that varies again from different ball games. And we also do presidential assistance when the president comes into town. We are sometimes requested to go out and assist with security, especially around bridges and areas, to prevent boaters from getting in that area, wherever the path of the president may be going. That's just giving you an idea about some statistics. Next slide. Again, as I kind of jumped ahead on you, we were founded in 1967. And the pictures that you see here are the gentleman that actually created the team. His name is Dale Apple. And I just gave you a little bit of background on his story. And again, he did need to see I saw the needs for the divers in the area. And back then, there wasn't a dive team I don't think in the state of Kentucky back in 1967. There may have been, some volunteers, but they weren't organized. And and essentially, Boone County Water Rescue has one of the oldest dive teams in the state of Kentucky. And again, no one can find recovering drowning victims so far. Thank you, Angela. Just a little background. We back in, I think it was around 2006, 2007 area, Campbell County Water Rescue, which had existed for many years. We actually merged with with Campbell, and became, they more or less became Boone County Water Rescue. We served this, and this is just some pictures of the folks that were part of Campbell County Water Rescue at that time. Captain, gentleman by the name Joe Davis was the captain. So just a little bit of background on the merger.
Yeah, and just really quickly, if I'm not breaking up, I apologize for my internet connection. Boone County started as Boone County Water Rescue, and then kind of started serving Kenton County, and so it became Boone Kenton County Water Rescue, and then merged with Campbell County. So that's just a little bit of a timeline.
It was 2009 when we merged with Campbell County.
Okay, thank you. Talk about a little bit about our dive operations, and by all means, Angela, advance the slide as needed as I talk. So again, here's Captain Apple, and this is back in the day when they didn't have quite the dive equipment. In fact, most of the team members back then, the funding was very limited, so they had their own dive equipment. They would go out and buy their tanks, regulators, whatever gear, fins and knives, and they would support themselves. And that's where kind of the beginning of this is. It was all scuba back then, where today it's much advanced, much more advanced than it is, or was then. Angela, you want to continue? And again, this is just well, this demonstrates actually one of the feats that Captain Apple managed out of many. He was the first to actually come up with the idea of putting a head protection on divers, because the water environment that we dive in is very hazardous. And anything in the Ohio River, you can imagine what's thrown in the Ohio River. Not just to mention, especially around bridge piers where you've got just, discarded iron, rebar, concrete. So there are many hazards that can damage or cause physical damage to a diver. Captain Apple realized that, and this, I forget what period of time it was, but he came up with the idea to put helmets on. In fact, he was the first in the nation to do that.
Yeah, and I have a little tidbit from Captain Apple. I got to interview him a little bit before doing this presentation, and I apologize for having my video off, but my connection isn't great here. He said that he worked with a motorcycle helmet company out of Cincinnati to create a motorcycle helmet that was suitable for diving, and he did in fact create the first head protection for diving in the country.
And here's just a picture of those helmets in use. This is ice diving, where they have to break into the ice, especially in the ponds or lakes where it's frozen over. If a person were to fall, which has happened many times, this kind of demonstrates the use of those helmets. And again, you can imagine you bumping your head in that ice and actually cutting your head open. So again, this is just a demonstration. Next slide. Some more pictures of the very beginnings of the diving for Boone County Water Rescue. Some of the older members. The very first dive truck we had, which was a wood box panel truck. You can see Dale kind of instructing. Go ahead, Angel. Again, this actually was taken out of Camp Ernst Lake, which that plane is, believe it or not, still currently there. It's rather rotted at this point, so there's not much left of the plane. But for many years, that plane was used to help dive training for brand new divers to get accustomed to black water. Now, when I say black water, some of you may know what I'm talking about. But in the Ohio River and even lakes and ponds, visibility in most cases is zero visibility. You might have a little bit of light, but a lot of times there's no light. So the diver cannot actually visually see anything. And the way the diver conducts himself or herself is by navigating by hand. So when they come in contact with an object like this, for example, this plane, they literally have to describe to the surface what they're encountering. Example, if they come into a car, evidence. If they come across a gun, sometimes a gun may feel like a stick, but once they start investigating that with their hands, using their hands with their eyes, they're able to determine what they're on. Next slide. Just some more pictures. And of course, now you see a little different style helmet the diver's wearing in this picture. That's actually referred to as a super light. And that is a contained sealed helmet. And basically that protects the diver from both the biochemical hazards from the water actually coming in contact with the diver's skin, which in many cases on scuba, that does occur. We do have several different types. I've had several types of these helmets and still do today to protect the diver from coming in contact with that material. Next slide. This is another type of helmet, or actually it's not a helmet, it's what's called a full face mask. It's manufactured by Kirby Morgan. And this particular diver was actually, this was during an evidence collection, and this diver was going out to search for evidence. But just to give you an idea, and this is scuba now. We also, which you saw in the earlier slide, you might have saw those yellow hoses. We also have surface supply, which surface supply diving is a little different. Scuba, you're relying on the air that's in the tank that's on the diver's back. Whereas surface supply, this supply comes, just like it says, from the surface. We have control stations with air tanks set up. The diver has an umbilical, the airline comes, or the air comes through that umbilical to the diver, and we can feed the diver for hours versus being limited to the capacity of a typical 80, what's called an 80 cubic foot tank. Next slide. And this is a typical bank setup, the bank setup dive. And again, as I mentioned to you about the yellow colored hose. Okay, Angela, I think there we go. Okay, that's fine. Again, this is just showing you a surface applied setup. We still use scuba tanks in a surface supply. Those are used as bailout bottles in case of emergency. Say, for example, if that airline were to get cut, the diver would lose air immediately. So by having another backup tank on their back, they can switch over to that and be able to survive. Of course, there's a limited time when they're on that. Next slide.
The ironic part about the super light, that it's the weight of it.
Well, you want to go ahead, Cindy, or want me to?
Yeah, the super light, it's an ironic name for that because it weighs about almost 25 to 30 pounds. So when you pick it up, you're like, this is not a light helmet. Why did they call it a super light?
Well, it's much lighter than the Mark IV Navy helmet that a lot of people refer to when they talk about dive helmets. And of course, those helmets weigh a lot more than these. These are actually made out of fiberglass, but they still have several weights on them. And the reason for that is to allow the diver, because what happens is, inside that helmet, even though it weighs about 26, 27 pounds on the surface, when they're in the water, it only weighs about 4 or 5 pounds. And again, because it's weighted. So there's still some positive buoyancy in the hat, but it doesn't weigh near as much, the point being. If it did, the diver's neck would end up being this big by working out from that helmet, diving that helmet. So yes, good point, Cindy, appreciate it. Next slide.
And this setup is no problem. This setup is the surface supply setup that Captain Purcell was talking about, and just as a visual for that.
Next slide. Okay, again, another setup. However, this is a scuba setup. You notice there's no umbilical line with that yellow and different colored hose entwined. And a lot of times we will dive this configuration. It all depends if it's a quick dive and we know where the object is, which I'll get into it a little later, how we find out where objects are, versus doing a long search pattern. Because there are actually two types of diving that we do. Well, search-wise, there's two types or three types. One is in the old days, before we had the newer technology to find targets, to find objects, we had to rely on the divers actually going out and doing patterns. Now, there's some old-fashioned tools as well, such as the old drag bars. Some of you may remember those that were used in the day, which basically had hooks on those, and those would be hooked into something, whether a car or a victim, and they could locate the body that way, or they could locate the target that way, excuse me. But the patterns, they take up a lot of time, and that's where we need extra air, and just to be as a safety factor, make sure we're providing enough air that diver can continue the patterns. But in other cases, we may not need that, especially if it's going to be what we call a bounce dive. And that's where we found something laying on the bottom. It's not too deep, because that is a consideration as far as going from scuba to surface. but it's fairly shallow. It's bounce dive. The diver just goes down, picks it up, and he's probably in and out of the water within 10 minutes or less. So we do have multi-use or multi-purpose dive setups. We, a lot of times, the reason this reminds me of something is this is what we call the sunset cruises. A lot of times on boat patrols, we may go out or on a detail. We may be on the river. It might start early in the morning and it may end up in next early morning. So we sometimes refer those as the sunrise and sunset cruisers. Anyway, great picture. This is actually a detail that happened down in Tennessee. There was a firefighter that went missing. And there were multiple agencies involved in this. And I can tell you that one gentleman here, his name is Blades Robinson. He's the head of International Association of Dive Rescue Specialists. Many of you may not know that, but a lot of dive agencies, police and fire, I mean, from New York, Chicago, big metropolitan cities. Those guys are actually certified through IEDRS. So I just wanted to mention Blades in this picture. But the firemen, unfortunately, due to all their efforts and all the different agencies that were down, didn't locate him. He ended up floating some miles downstream. Next slide.
Do it that way.
As one of our divers, you notice he might be a little sweaty. This was a very hot, warm and hot summer day. And of course, that gear is not very comfortable in the summertime. What he's wearing is actually a dry suit. Some may be more familiar with the neoprene wetsuits, which are designed to actually allow water into your inside of the suit, and your body warms that up. That's one way to keep it up. But in our case, when we dive in hazardous areas, especially again, as I mentioned about the dive hat, it protects the diver against biochemical hazards coming in contact with the skin. That's what the purpose of the dry suit is. The dry suit also keeps water away from the person of the diver's body. So I kind of just want to bring that up. Next slide. Again, another setup. This was a drowning at Cave Run Lake, my very first recovery, which is 2002 or something like that, I forget. And this actually, this was the middle of winter, very cold dive. But again, you're seeing we're wearing protective suits. Next slide. This happened out in Colorado. There was a 2-year-old that fell off the back of a boat. And unfortunately, the lake was up in the mountains. I forget the name of the lake, but it was a very deep lake. And we were called out again. And in incidents like this, there are many agencies called to assist to locate people, that unfortunately drown. So this is just one of the details out of many that we've gone on. And yes, we were using somebody else's boat. That's fine. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Okay, this is evidence collection detail, which involved, and I think we're going to get into some slides here to show this. There's some gentlemen that thought it'd be a great idea to do some poaching, and they did a lot of that out in the Midwest, different states in the Midwest, and they made the mistake of coming back to Kentucky and trying to sell and get things taxidermied. And a lot of the things that they acquired in their hunts was completely illegal. So this is actually recovering one of those pieces of animals that and the gentleman actually signed his name to this bag. So in terms of evidence, it doesn't get much better than that. And he put a date on it as well. There it is. I probably should have scratched that name out. Go ahead, next slide. I didn't see that. My bad. So anyway, yeah, this was the article that was done up on it. And the Kentucky Fish and Wildlife officer who headed up the investigation on the Kentucky side, his name was Charlie Smith. Great guy, very smart guy. And he put together a heck of a case. He went around and collected a lot of different pieces of evidence that basically in court, these guys did get convicted because of it. So that's just a little background on that. There's some more information. Unfortunately, you probably can't read the magazine, but just goes to show the extent that what these guys did and the types of animals that they went out and hunted and killed, again, illegally. Next slide. This was Nebraska. Very thick ice during winter time. There were 2 men that actually drowned during that point. Unfortunately, that operation was pretty much cut off. It was just impossible to cut through the ice without some type of icebreaker, which most people don't have that type of boat unless you're out in the, out in the ocean. So we did our best there, and everyone there did their best. Again, multiple agencies involved in that, but it was just a task that we simply could not complete due to the conditions. And a lot of times that will happen, and not just the ice. We can have river conditions where we have to suspend an operation, which really bothers us, because when the family is missing someone, they want to see you go and go. And sometimes they don't understand that due to safety reasons, we can't always do that. A lot of them do understand, but it causes some worry and not conflict, but just worry. So that was one of these cases where, unfortunately, we couldn't do a whole lot of work there. Just another picture, same location. And we'll talk about this. Some of that gear in that picture we're going to bring up. That's part of the side scan sonar gear. Just another picture, and you could tell from this picture what type of conditions how thick the ice was, even though they try to break it up. And for a small boat with a single outboard engine like that, it's a very difficult task to try to achieve. Next slide. Another picture. Okay, now we're going to get into boat patrols a little bit. And again, I kind of describe what we do over the weekends, and I'll be brief on this since I've already done that. Next slide. And we're just showing, this is one of the first boats that the water rescue team acquired. I don't remember what date this was acquired, but you can tell by the picture it was probably 30 years ago, 40 years ago, possibly.
And the boat prior, don't go back to the boat prior on that one. Isn't it the one that we have, we can dive off of and have the side scan sonar and everything established on it?
I wasn't going to mention that because I think there was a trivia question.
Here's a slide later.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I didn't want to ruin the surprise for anyone.
There better be answers to that trivia question popping up.
I was going to say, you just got it. Just another example, and then I'll talk about this just a second. A lot of times on the river, what we'll do to assist barges, especially in downtown Cincinnati area where they have to go through bridges, and on weekends when you've got boat traffic, and it's amazing that a lot of boaters, they don't pay a lot of attention to barges. They don't think that the barge is going to hit them or can hit them, and they think the barge can get out of their way, which most people realize that's not the case. And especially trying to navigate through bridges, it is extremely difficult for a captain, a barge captain, a tow captain, to do any type of special maneuvers, because his main concern is not hitting the bridges. And there have been cases where, yes, we've had people struck, mostly due to the broken down boats. But one of the things we try to do on the weekends is escort the barges through. So we'll get out in front with our boat or boats and try to help kind of push people out of the way. And make them realize, or at least let them know the barge is coming. And a lot of them will go, oh, okay, and they'll move. But in some cases, you have to get a little more forceful. But I just want to mention that that's one of the things we do during the boat patrols. It just provides safety for others that are boating. Next slide. This gentleman we picked up, I'm not sure, it was a jet ski. His jet ski failed, and it was sinking at the time. And I remember picking this up. It's just one of the things that we do to help people that have disabled vessels, or in this case, a jet ski. We try to bring them on board, make sure they're okay physically, and then take them to the nearest point of safety. Here's a great picture of our river boats. Well, not ours, but one or two of ours. And this is, again, one of the special events that we cover during the weekends. We will go out again just to be a safety boat, basically, for these events. We have had instances where somebody has gotten ill on one of these river boats and had to escort them, or had to take them off and deliver them to emergency medical services on land. Here's the crew just preparing for a boat patrol. And here's some of the special events. Of course, the EBM fireworks. As you see, just as one picture, this boat actually has multiple capabilities, and several of ours do. One of the capabilities is actually being a fireboat. So it's able to actually help put out fires, which there have been a couple that we've done. Help put out burning boats. In fact, not too long ago, well, it's probably six or 7 years ago, we put out, no, it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago. There was a boat that caught on fire down in Villa Hills, which there were 6 people on board. And fortunately, they were able to get off the boat by help from the other people in the marine. And meanwhile, we were en route to put the boat out, to put the fire out of the boat. So the boats have quite a few capabilities. Next slide. Cindy, you want to talk about this bit?
Yeah, several years ago, St. Elizabeth, the breast cancer, asked us to help participate in the dragon boat races. And we were asked to participate in the very first one. One reason being there is medical reasons, if somebody was to fall off the boat or off their canoe, and be able to assist them in the water. We did this up until COVID hit, and then after COVID, they didn't have them anymore. But it was one of the things that was really a nice thing to be a participant in, that we were asked to do. And being out on, it was AJ Jolly Park to be exact, being out on their part of it and helping them out. It was a very satisfactory part of it, because they were thankful for us being out there, and plus let them know that, you know, we're here to help you if something happens. And closer to shore, one of them did flip, and we kept saying, just stand up, just stand up. And they were freaking out. Well, when they stood up, the water was only to their waist. But that was one of the ones we did enjoy, like being out on and taking care of everybody and watching the events.
Just a picture of another detail. How are you doing on time, folks?
Let's see,
You're
Heather.
about halfway.
Well,
We're
I
at
mean,
7:03.
well, let me know
Yeah, we're
when
about
you want
halfway.
to stop so we can do questions and things like that. Otherwise, I'll keep going.
Keep going, Flip.
Okay, so this picture, this is some of the old equipment back in the day. Yeah, this is before I was around, so just to give you an idea where the team started, I guess, is a good way to display this.
It's when the elders were driving them.
The elders, yes, and I'll never live that down.
This is after parade that we did at Fort Mitchell for their Independence Day. We drive the Kubota, pass out candy to the kids, and then sometimes we have our own kids riding in the back passing out candy too. And then we come back and regroup and head on home.
And here are 3 of our boats. Of course, 220 is the largest. There's 220, and that is Dale Apple. This picture was taken up in Seattle. The boat was manufactured by Munson, and we actually achieved a grant, or got a grant through Dale Apple's work, through FEMA, to purchase that boat. And that boat was the very first customized boat that we had. In fact, it was kind of rare back then. It was one of the unique boats in the United States because of its capabilities. And as the trivia question asked about, it not only has integrated diving systems, which is also surface supply or scuba, integrated sonar systems. We run ROVs off of it. And again, it's a fireboat as well. But again, it was one of the first to actually be like that in the United States. And even though it wasn't built, it was built back in 2012, 2013. So we're very fortunate to have that. Not many agencies have a boat like that, especially volunteer agencies. That gives you an idea of how well, and we greatly appreciate our funding, which is by Boone County and Campbell County. I forgot to mention that earlier. So we're very fortunate to have that, and that has given us the ability to purchase this type of equipment, which, you know, this is top-notch stuff. All right, now a little bit about side scan. Angela, jump in here anytime you want to. I feel like I'm doing all the talking. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is side scan sonar and how does it work? Well, first of all, sonar, not to get real technical, but sonar stands for sounding and ranging. Basically, sonar sends out an acoustic wave. Whatever that wave strikes, there's a reflection off of that, and it goes right back to the sending source, which we call the towfish, which is this torpedo-looking object in the picture. Once it receives that, it actually paints an image of the bottom, and that sound actually goes all the way across the bottom for whatever range we set it to. And then whatever it strikes in between those echoes come back, and it paints a picture on a computer screen. And without getting too much more technical, I'll stop there. But that kind of describes this. Next slide. This is the late night operation. This is on boat 220 with running sonar, searching more than likely for a victim, I think, at this point. Next slide. Okay, this talks a little bit about the technical, how sonar kind of works, but if you want to, you can think of it, again, you've got that signal that comes out, and actually it transmits on both sides of the sonar. So we have two channels that cover a wide area. And the sonar systems like this, they're able to cover a much larger area in a faster time than we could ever do by putting a diver on the bottom and doing patterns. I mean, you can literally cover a half a mile at probably what we call swath areas of 400 to 500 feet wide within probably 10 minutes, 20 minutes. So it's able to cover a larger area versus us trying to put divers in the water and do patterns. And it actually produces better images than some of our other equipment like drop cameras, which we actually do have drop cameras. This is an image of a, believe it or not, of a water intake. That water intake goes below the surface down to bedrock, goes below the surface about 80 feet below the surface to a man-made tunnel, which links over to Kellogg Avenue at the water distribution plant that's there. Vertical scanning technique. I know the vertical scanning is not something new at the time that we did it, so we didn't really invent it, but what we did was invent a better way of doing it than the other agencies are doing. In fact, the company that manufactures this unit, which is called Marine Sonic, they are a world provider of this type of sonar system, which is called side scan. When we started playing around with this, we kind of followed how others were doing it and found it didn't work so well. You got images, but not good. So what we did was we came up with just a simple common solution, and we figured out how to basically rotate the toadfish to get a vertical scan, but at a much higher resolution. This is just an example. That's a picture of a Ford Ranger truck. By the way, that picture, Marine Sonic actually has in their office, so the big poster. They use it in their training today. And this image was taken, over 10 years ago.
2013.
Yeah, well, okay, 10 years ago about. Yeah. All right, what you're seeing here, just this is actually the bridge pier off the Purple People Bridge. The one thing that's neat about it, and again, we were one of the first to actually get this type of imaging. You can clearly see the masonry stonework that's actually out in it's the facing of the pier, what they call facing. But you can clearly see the masonry stones. Now that same pier, that's in the bottom picture, by the way, I'm sorry. The top picture, that is a horizontal scan of that pier. So it kind of gives you an idea the difference between a vertical and a horizontal scan. And most people, they scan horizontally with systems. They don't rotate the toadfish. There's some brackets and things you have to make. But that's just to give you an idea what a normal horizontal scan, the top image, will show you. Off to the left is the actual bridge pier. As I mentioned earlier, one of our pieces of technology we acquired years ago, which we still use to this day, was a drop camera. The only thing with the drop camera is it's very limited in range, especially the Ohio River. You remember that visibility I talked about, where you only have, well, in some cases, diver don't have any. But a camera, on the other hand, and special type cameras, they can pick up light, even low levels light where the human eye can't. So a lot of times they'll still give you visibility, but you still may only have a foot or so of visibility. And basically how we use these, we will drop them on the bottom, and they are on their own umbilical. They link back to a TV monitor, which is also, well, this is actually VCR code. I'll tell you how old this is. But we drag those cameras on the bottom as we try to search or do patterns to try to search for an object. Next slide. Just showing you more how it operates, or how we operate it with it, and the umbilical. Next. Now this little gem, this was it added a lot of value to our team in terms of equipment. This is an underwater remote operated vehicle, ROV, and it has a lot of capability. And now it also has a built-in camera, but the one thing it has a different type of sonar system to where it, well, without getting in detail, I'll just say it's a different type of sonar system, but it allows us to actually navigate by sonar on the bottom. We can see trees. I mean, you just saw some of the images. That ROV, that system, although it doesn't have as long a range, it can still pick up images with a higher resolution, and you can literally navigate across the bottom. And other things like vehicles and boats, they come up, they just jump off the screen at you. And so do drowning victims, unfortunately. This is just a setup. Angela, you want to talk about this?
I will give it a shot. I've been kicked out once, so if I start breaking up, just take over for me.
Sure.
My connections are poor, unfortunately. So yeah, just really quickly, we thought we'd put everything together in kind of one detail. So we've been talking a lot about what we do and how we do it in pieces and things like that. So one of the things that we did not too long ago, Ken, I think that you were on this part, locating this boat. You want to
Yes.
talk a little bit about?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I can hear you break it up. Okay, so
Okay.
the one thing, when we first got side scan, and a lot of the agencies, when they first get side scan, they, especially, and I'd say paid agencies, but in order for them to do training, their folks have to be paid, of course, but volunteers don't have to worry about that so much. But this was a fantastic item, and we were thrilled to get it. So thrilled that we literally spent weeks during the weekday, even though we have normal jobs. We would go out 2 and 3 days a week plus weekends and just scan miles and miles of the Ohio River. Well, I think in the second week when we were out scanning, we came across something, which I don't have the image up here for that, but it was weird. So we went back to look at it. And sure enough, this is the image we came across. And what you're looking at is actually the remnants of 2 wooden old barge boats. The one that's buried, really don't have a length on that, but the width on that's about 35 feet in width, and maybe a little wider. The long one you see, that's almost 300 feet in length. Just to give you an idea how big of a wooden barge it was. And we've measured that many times, and it definitely is 300 feet. We have tried to look up to see what type of barge or what type of boat that was back in the day. We estimate it was made over 100 years ago. And where it ended up on the bank was actually where the old river bank used to be, but this location, this boat's on 35 feet of water, where it's currently at. But back then, before the dams were built, the river wasn't that wide, and it was a lot shallower. These boats, and the reason you see the one angled, we believe these were actually parked, beached, if you will, on the bank. They may have been no longer used, maintenance-wise, whatever happened to them. But one of the things we found to indicate that is we found 3 Coke bottles. Now, 3 Coke bottles we found, they were definitely placed alongside that boat. There was no way that somebody threw them out, and those bottles went 35 feet deep and ended up in the position they were in. They all 3 were sitting up in a row. One was turned upside down between 2. We actually recovered one of those. And yeah, sure enough, that bottle was, oh gosh, back in the probably 40s. So that's just kind of interesting note. But this is one of the things we did when we started working with SideScan. So we got very proficient at doing it because all the hours we trained ourselves with. And we've always told people, a lot of teams have SideScan, but they need to get out and train more with it. And then they basically train your eye to pick up objects. So I probably talked too long about this, but this was a pretty neat feature. This was the dive we did on that boat to recover some pieces of it. Dive setup. Next slide. Next slide. Okay.
So
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna point out that this is the part of the dive gear that's been integrated into the boat. There's a communication system, an air system, and the video capabilities are all inside the boat, and it's integrated into 220. And this is kind of a picture of that.
And Angela, thank you for that. And the significant reason why we did that is in the past with the boats that we had, all that equipment we had to hand carry down to the boat, which was, and our boats didn't have a lot of deck space to handle all that gear. So that was one of the purposes of having this boat built and designed, was to have all that integrated. And it made it much easier for operations, much safer for operations as well. Thanks, Angela. This is us trying to pull a big piece of wood of a section of that boat. When I say big, it's probably about a 20-foot long, 3-foot wide side of the hull. which those boats were actually put together, believe it or not, with wooden spikes, not bolts. I'm going to stop right here. Somebody's asking a question. Why is a diver going into the water without fins? There are certain times when we will not use fins. It depends on the current, depends on the type of dive it is. Not every dive you need fins. It is a safety concern. But for example, in heavy current, what we have found is fins are actually hurtful to a diver. You cannot move your legs much, especially in strong current. Of course, we govern strong current dives as much as possible. And we basically, in fact, limited it down to right around 2 to 3 miles per hour, depending on the situation. But to answer your question, there are times when we will not use fins.
And oftentimes we put fins on last one of the last things to go on. The diver will be sitting at the edge of the water and somebody will put their fins on right before they go in.
True, thank you. Okay, ice rescue program. This is another educational program that we provide to other agencies as well as internal to our team. And it's designed to basically prepare a recovery of someone who's fallen in the water and to do it safely and effectively and get the person out of the water as fast as possible. Next slide. This is just an example. This is not really ice rescue, but an example of the old days. When I talked about they had to cut through the ice to dive. This is actually, Ken Purcell Lake. And this is more current day.
Yeah, and our group educates other agencies on ice rescue. We do ice rescue training for other groups of people, and that's shown here.
And what you're seeing is a coordinated effort to have main person that goes in after the person in the water, I shouldn't say victim. And then we have backup personnel in case they get into a situation that they need assistance with. So there's at least 4 person, it's a 4-person rescue in most cases, just to have backup. And of course you have other crew members that are backing those people up as well. This was a animal rescue. A duck actually apparently froze overnight to the pond. Unfortunately, that duck did not make it. This is a fairly new program that was maybe started about 5 years ago. No, we started about 6 or 7 years ago, didn't we, Cindy?
Yep.
So this is a rescue swimmer program, and I'll go through this. If you want to go through the pictures, that's fine, but I'll just talk about it a little bit. The purpose of this program is on boat patrols. Our policy was in the past where if anybody went in the water, it had to be a certified diver that's on the team or a team diver. No one else was allowed to go in the water just for the pure sake of training and safety for that reason. But we often found that a lot of times we do have a number of divers, but not all of them can make boat patrols at certain events or certain periods during the summer. So we decided to expand that and include regular team members who weren't divers, but yet could go through a program that would teach them how to survive a situation if they had to go into water and recover someone, assist someone, and rescue them. So that's the purpose of this, is to get those people trained to be able to handle something like that and do it, safely and survive. This is during the swim, the river swim. This is just one of the news articles.
There's about 6 or 7.
And this one, unfortunately, many have probably remembered the accident that happened on the I-275 bridge back in 2016, to where there were actually 2 car accidents. The first car accident actually created the second car accident due to the traffic. And this was right around 4 p.m. or so. And unfortunately, this vehicle was pushed off the bridge, and there was one person inside of it. And unfortunately, he perished. Pretty sure in the collision or the impact of the water pretty much did him in. But unfortunately, at that time, the river current was up so high that although we attempted to dive on that, this car ended up next to one of the bridge piers, the Kentucky side. And that current being so strong, and with that pier interfering with that current, it made it very difficult to dive. And basically the dive was unsuccessful. We ended up calling the operation off until the river dropped down, the level dropped down. And we ended up actually getting a commercial dive team to come in. And of course, their protocol was they don't dive in anything over 2 miles per hour in the Ohio River. So it took 11 days for that to happen. So you may remember that was a long period before we, during that time, the first 4 or 5 days, I think, nobody knew who the person of the occupant of the vehicle was, but eventually found out by the person missing, not being a family, not being able to contact. So just a little background on that. And again, there were a lot of agencies involved in that as well. Cindy, you want to talk about this one, or?
Yeah, this was a lady who was on the bow of a boat. It was the week prior to Labor Day weekend or Memorial Day weekend, and I think it was 5 years ago. And they had left Ludlow Bromley Yacht Club and went up river, and they had a wake, and she had fallen off the boat, and of course no life jacket. And it took a while to find her, and she did eventually float up, and of course that one was with a lot of agencies too, who was helping to recover her and bring her back to her family.
Thank you. I remember the mess at Manhattan, excuse me. Ludlow Bromley Yacht. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were there for a big part of that, and using sonar. Again, now there were many, there were some commercial folks there, Coast Guard and other agencies involved in this, basically trying to clean the river up after the mess that the barge created. It took several days to do that. We primarily were there to provide sonar and target location, and then turn that information over to the dive teams and crane teams, which was very successful. Got the river cleaned up, although it did take a couple of days, which during that entire time, the Ohio River was shut down, which definitely had an impact on commercial traffic. I don't have anything to say about this one. Sorry. Now, Lattimore and James Hutchinson, and this occurred within about a month period of time. Two young boys that due to foul play, at least, well, we know Jason Hutchinson's was, but now Lattimore's a little boy, I think he's 3 years old. And if you remember him, his mother's boyfriend ended up killing her, dumping her body just below the Purple People Bridge on the Cincinnati side. And then later we had reason to believe that he may have put this little boy in the Ohio River based off a stroller that was found, which belonged to the little boy. And again, many agents were there for this. We searched for several weeks for him, and the river current unfortunately was high, so we're not certain what may have happened to his body. And to this day, his body hasn't been found. James Hutchinson, a lady up in Ohio, and her boyfriend. You probably heard the story where this lady dropped her kids off at a park, and apparently James, her son, made contact with the vehicle. And then later the boyfriend and her decided to dispose of his body at the 275 bridge down in the Lawrenceburg area. And again, many agencies were involved in that search, but unfortunately we could not locate him either. So that's and it's very sad when we have to, when you're talking about kids, that's the one thing that bothers many members on this team, and it bothers everybody. So the bridge fire. We were a part of this, and our main goal was to keep boats away from the bridge while an investigation was ongoing to determine what had happened, and as well as the damage to the boat, how severe, or damage to the bridge, excuse me, how severe it was, what it was going to take to repair the bridge. There was a lot of work in that. Ken County did a fantastic job. Ken County EMA. So that was our involvement. That was just to keep boats away during that period. Now, this just recently happened last year. In the news, you probably heard about the Manhattan boat fire, in which claimed the lives of one person immediately, was killed pretty much during the fire, but the second succumbed to his injuries. Again, we do work with many agencies: Coast Guard, Cincinnati, Covington, other agencies, Kent County, Campbell County. All right, I'll stop. Go ahead, Sydney.
That's okay. No,
I've chewed up enough time.
you're fine. I am a CPR first aid AED instructor, and I love to teach. I love to teach anybody to, especially with CPR. And when the Bengals game happened January 5th, the Monday night football game, and nearly lost a player, that a lot of things had changed in that aspect of it. A lot of people saw what CPR could do. It could save a life. And that night he was very lucky because he had everyone in the place to be able to save that gentleman. Well, after that, everyone realized how important CPR was. And we as the agency, we teach CPR to the community and to our own team members, because all of our team members have to have first aid and CPR. We're all first responders on that aspect of it. But a lot of people were inquiring, hey, you teach CPR. We know your agency does. Would you like to come out and just teach us the CPR basics, well, not the basics, but and go through it? So I've actually had a lot of phone calls. A couple of hotels and outside people have called and said, would you please teach us some CPR? We need to learn how to do this. And this is one, actually my church that I go to, we spent a whole Saturday doing CPR and training, and that's showing how to take care of a baby that's lost consciousness, is choking, or not breathing anymore. So the one main goal was, this year is a lot of people are asking to be taught CPR and first aid, and the circumstances behind it, it made everybody aware that it does work. And on our divers, we do pre and post. Our divers, before they get into the water or even before they get into training, we take their blood pressure, their pulse, we talk to them. We want to get a feel on how those divers are feeling at that time, if their mind's clear, or if they're got something on their mind, or if they're a little worried. We want to make sure that our divers are safe. That is our number one safety item, is to make sure our divers are safe. So we take their blood pressure prior to them going into the training or going into any detail. And then we also take it after they come out, because we want to make sure that their vitals are in a good area, that we don't have to have extra medical help to come in and take care of them. And as you can tell, that's what we were doing on the bank. We do it in a dive truck. We take their vitals anywhere that we're located. Let me go on this one too.
Sure.
Okay. Also, I head up the PR for our agency. We like to reach out to the community, and the one things that we do is education. Education is very important. Lieutenant Hatton was teaching a drowning reconstruction class to another agency on how it works, how to recover, what to look for. Talked about different parts of of recovery. This has been many years ago, but it still is a good learning tool that we have for this day. Elementary students, we like to teach them about water safety, and as you can see, Dave Flick has different life vests on. Make sure that the life vests are secure. Make sure the life vests fit. Make sure it's your life vest. But we want to teach agencies and kids and adults the safety on the river, because the river can take you, for even the best swimmers, it can take somebody very quickly. And we used to be out at the fairgrounds and communicating with the public. That's viewing some of our side scan and the operations and the camera and the helmet and what we call the tow fish. That's at Burlington. And what we do too is we'll do a quick little CPR for everybody there. We'll get our mannequins out and we'll show them a quick 5-minute what to do in an emergency for CPR, to give them an idea on how it feels to actually use a dummy to be able to do chest compression, so they get an idea of what it actually feels like to be doing CPR. Cute little boy. But yeah, we will go out, we do touch-a-trucks, we'll go out to do Heroes Days for some of the agencies. We do parades, we'll be doing Alexandria Parade the Sunday for Alexandria VFW. That is Fort Mitchell's 4th of July. We passing out candy, and we had juices that year. We will be doing also the City of Florence on Memorial Day for their parade, and we'll be doing a Heroes Day for Campbell County Library on June 27th. It's a Tuesday, and we'll be at the Tower Park up in Fort Thomas. So anytime you need us to come out or demonstrate, we would love to come out and meet you. And the best part of it is when you sit there and you talk to everybody, they're like, they never realize we're a volunteer agency. And it astonishes them that we actually have jobs and that we do this 365 days a year, 24 hours, because we're always on call. And we do decorate it up, make it look pretty. The Kubota comes in handy. And then we were asked, this is one time we were asked several years, it was 10 years that we did this. We were asked to help in the polar bear plunge down in Bellevue, and it's for Special Olympics. And one gentleman wanted to jump and he had special needs. So they had called our agency up and asked if, one of our divers could actually jump in the water with this gentleman. And he wanted to jump. So our diver was in the dry suit and he jumped in. And he jumped in with this gentleman because he wanted to do this polar bear plunge. And it was the best feeling ever because he was very happy that he actually got to do a polar bear plunge. So the following year, the Special Olympics came back and asked us if we could participate every year with them. And we would get in the water. Actually, we have 2 of our divers who would actually get in the water and stay in the water the whole time, which was about 2 hours with everyone jumping in, making sure that they got out safe, making sure that they were able to get to the ladder and go on one of those. But that's Lieutenant Tony Wilson. Yes, that's my husband. That is the lady from Fox 19 getting in the water with him to see what it was like. We dressed her in a Mustang suit to let her see what it felt like to get inside that water. But yeah, they're in there. Like I said, they're in there for the whole duration of the water, and they are cold, but they're in there to help for everybody's safety to get them out because little kids jump in and older people jump in. So they were able to step in and help them out. Angela, you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, and I just want to let you know that we are running over time right now, and I don't know why it just went by itself. So I don't know if you want to just say something briefly on the Ohio Riverway project before we wrap up.
Yeah, no problem. If you can hear me, the Ohio Riverway project is a project that's been going on. I saw that Brewster Rhodes is on the call today. So thank you for inviting us to this, and thank you for all of your support over the years. This was just one of the stops that this group made along the way. They were traveling from, I believe, somewhere up in Ohio down to Louisville. So we were able to join them on their stop in Boone County. And I think we'll open up for questions. I apologize, we went over by a little bit. If you have any questions, please contact us. And the contact information is there.